Is 9 years in prison a good enough sentence for someone accused of engaging in a security breach to advance false conspiracy theories of election fraud in the United States? 4 of those convictions were felonies. But we go back to the real question. Is 9 years a real sentence? Today I'm talking about Tina Peters, a former Mesa County clerk who was sentenced to 9 years in prison for election fraud and fund frauds. This was in August of 2024. Today with me, I have her legal representation, Peter Ticktin, Esquire. Peter has represented Tina for many years, and not just her, but many of the other January 6ers who were caught and accused and sentenced for political treason of the United States. Many of these people believed these were political attacks against them. So does Tina, and Peter actually, with many other lawyers, agree on this. But the reality is, was this political attacks, or are every single one of them actually guilty of the crimes and they're being accused? I'm Juan Collado Díaz, and welcome back to Político. Peter wear many hats, because first he was in the New York Military Academy for high school, where he skipped the first and last year of college, and he was admitted to medical school after 2 years of college. After 1 year of medical school, he said screw this and switched over to his true ambition, the law. And today he is the representative for Tina Peters, an amazing but political case, and has taken over the whole nation. Tina has been accused of trying to advance Trump, vocal, amazing, and crazy accusations of the election being stolen. And not just that, he's representing the January 6ers who rioted the Capitol building. But I want to ask you more about the Tina Peters case. So, Peter, if you don't mind telling me a little bit about this case and what got you so involved into it.
Okay, so Tina Peters' case involves a number of different ways that we're attempting to get Tina released from prison. We don't know which they're going to hit first, but we're pretty sure that we have a pretty good solid standing in regard to most of the ways that we're attempting. So the first and most obvious would be our appeal. We filed an appeal, which is going to now be argued in January. I'm not saying it's the first and what's going to come about, but it's kind of like the one thing that everybody would do under circumstances like this, where you have such terrible rulings by the trial judge that actually denied her of having her defense. So we're looking forward to getting before the panel of judges in the Colorado state courts in the appellate division, so that we're going to be able to, get that resolved. We're pretty sure that it's going to get reversed. The only way it's not going to get reversed is if we end up with a panel of far left judges that are just going to do whatever they want to do. And I don't know that that would be the case of any judge on the Court of Appeals, at least a panel of 3. So we'll have to see how that goes. The second thing we're doing is a petition for a writ of mandamus. Not mandamus, I'm sorry, a petition for a writ of habeas corpus, where we're attempting to get her released by the federal court, ordering the state court to release her. And that is only for the period that's pending between now and the time that the appeal is determined. Ordinarily in Colorado, a prisoner has the right to an appeal, and they have a right to be out of prison pending that appeal unless they're a danger to society. Judge Barrett, the state court judge that heard the case, made rulings that he would not let her out pending the appeal because he believed that she's dangerous to society, not on the basis of what is normally understood like a violent criminal, but based on what she might say. And so that's our basis in terms of the writ of habeas corpus. What we're looking for there is a release pending the appeal, because the only reason she's being held in prison is because a judge is worried about what she might say, which is violative of the First Amendment, the freedom of speech. So that opens that door. Thirdly, and hopefully the most immediate, is that the governor of the state and the people under him will work together with the federal government to release her into the hands of the federal prison. Now, that doesn't release her. Okay, and some of the people in the state government are a little bit confused about this because they think that this is a way of getting Tina Peters released from prison. What it does is it gets her out of the state prison and puts her into the federal prison system. And the federal prison system would mean probably camp for her, as opposed to where she is now, which is a complete mixture of types of prisoners. Like for the men's prisons, it's pretty clear. You've got your maximum security where you put your monsters. And you got your medium security, your minimum security, your camps, where you put white collar criminals. Now, if Tina Peters were guilty of anything, she would be a white collar criminal, but she's not actually guilty of anything. So but nevertheless, let's just look at white collar versus, and by white collar, what do we mean? Somebody that changes things in the paperwork, or somebody that is doing basically innocuous things, as opposed to the other extreme, which is violent and dangerous. I mean, there are some people that need to be behind bars, and that's the violent and dangerous ones. So in terms of what the government might do, we're looking forward to that. And now we're also moving and applying for a pardon from the president, because we believe that his powers go further than most people think, in that he can actually pardon state offenses. And, and the reason that people think that he can only pardon federal offenses is because the Constitution is very clear that he can pardon offenses against the United States. In today's world, in the 21st century, and in fact, in the 20th century, and part of the 19th century, we looked at these things. You look at the United States and what it's understood to be, and it is it's one country. But prior to the end of the Civil War, when people spoke of the United States, they spoke of the United States as the plural, because they were dealing with the states. It's kind of if you put a whole bunch of countries together and you had the United Countries of, let's say, South America, okay? So you have all those united countries, and when you speak of them, you're dealing with them as the countries, okay? That if somebody could pardon any offenses against the united countries, the way that would be understood would be the individual countries that would have those convictions. And that's the way it was in the United States. So, and in fact, the Constitution itself speaks of the United States in the plural. And even the 13th Amendment speaks of the United States in the plural as their, and so on. I could read that to you if you want. I happen to have a copy of the Constitution in my hand. So
that is incredible that you carry that. I love that. I have a personal friend of mine, really close friend, and he always carries his Constitution with him too. So I love to see that. Which more people would do that.
I'm asked questions about it from time to time. So look, this is what happened to me. Okay, I'm flying in a plane. I didn't see movies that anything to watch. So I saw Lincoln. So I figured I saw that in the movie theaters many years ago, but let me go and see Lincoln. Let me watch it again. At the end of the movie, they read the 13th Amendment, which is neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. See what I mean? Let me take out the exception just to make it easier to understand. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. They're not talking about its jurisdiction, the United States of America, the country we know today, because for the first 100 years or so of its existence, until after the Civil War, it was considered the different states. States doesn't mean like a province or, a township or an area within another country. A state. I mean, what do we have? What is Marco Rubio? He's the Secretary of State. States are countries, and when he goes to other states, other countries, he deals with them. And so when we first formed, we were 13 colonies, and the 13 colonies were then freed at the end of the Revolutionary War. They were no longer part of England. Each one was its own state, and they became united. And that's the way it was understood. So that's our fourth way we need to get a pardon from President Trump. And, right now we're talking with people in the administration in that regard, especially Ed Martin, who is the pardon attorney, very bright and dedicated man.
Yeah, and this is like, Tina's not your only case right now that you're working based on this. If I'm correct, you're also working with some of the January 6th pardons. Am I correct? And you're going through that part to make sure people are treated fairly, no matter their stance.
That's correct. Yeah. We've got a name that's not well known, and I don't know why, because she's been so active. I mean, this lady never sleeps. I mean, she I don't know how she does what she does with 3 children in tow as well, but she is one of the American heroes that are emerging. Her name is Stephanie Lambert, and Stephanie was active in regard to one case that involved the election fraud. And so, in Antrim County, Michigan, where the trial judge allowed her to examine and have her experts examine election equipment. So she had her experts examine the election equipment, and that was totally legal. They found amazing things. They found phone chips inside, the kind of phone chips that you would have in your cell phone. So it's not necessary to plug in these computers in order to have them communicate with people in foreign countries. And those chips that were found in the machine that was looked at, in fact, were actually accessed on the night of the election in 2020. So we know that there was mischief done, but these folks, the ultra left governments that basically are part of this theft of the elections, they need to cover everything up the best they can. So they charged her with a criminal offense, and the offense that they charged her for didn't exist at the time that she was having her experts examine the equipment. They didn't exist because what the judge now has defined, because there's a law that says you're not allowed to unduly possess election equipment. So the trial judge decided, well, unduly means that you don't have permission from the Secretary of State or a proper order from a court. Well, there's nothing in the law that says the Secretary of State needs to prove this. She had nothing to do with it. The Secretary of State was not in the loop on these things. Let me put it this way: the contracts between people in the state and Dominion Machines, it was the clerks of the court, the clerks of the counties, who made the deals with the Dominion Machines. They're the ones that signed the contracts. They're the ones on behalf of the county that own the machines that were bought. Secretary of State doesn't come into that. And the clerks of the counties were the ones that gave the machines over to Stephanie Lambert's experts to examine the machines. So there was no crime. And yet she's facing some serious criminal charges that are now scheduled to go to trial the beginning of March. So that's they're trying to Tina Peters her, put her in prison for maintaining the truth, for protecting the evidence, for making sure that we knew and understood what really happened. In terms of the examination of the tabulators there too, no matter how they put the ballots into those machines that they examined, it didn't make any difference if they put him in mainly for Biden or mainly for Donald Trump or a mix for the two. They always came out like 2 for Trump, 4 for Biden, 2 for Trump, 4 for Biden. Time after time, they put 40,000 ballots through the machines and consistently got these fixed results. So we know the election in 2020 was fixed, but that's not what's important. What's important is the fact that we know that the machines are corrupted. We also know that the voter rolls are corrupted. And that means that we're going to need an order from the president that's going to need to declare that that there's an emergency. There is an election emergency. If you know now what I know, because I've seen the evidence, and if you could see and understand at this point in time that the machines are going to just do what they do, that means we don't have an election process. We have instead an emergency. And the president is empowered in emergencies to do what needs to be done. In this case, we're going to need paper ballots that are hand counted without mail-in ballots. People are going to need to go to the polls, or perhaps there'll be something special for people that are infirm. I don't know how it's going to work, but it cannot be where the machines are involved. If the machines are in play for the 2026 election, expect the Democrats, no matter what, to have a wide sweeping victory, giving them the House, giving them the Senate, and maybe even giving them enough votes so that an impeachment from the House will be followed by removal by the Senate. Yeah, that's a tall task. That's 2/3 they need. But give them close to that, and there might be some rhinos that are going to do the wrong thing, or some of the established Republicans that are really not Republicans. So, that's where we are in terms of Stephanie Lambert, and what she's facing and what she has accomplished. Both Stephanie Lambert and Tina Peters have each done great service for the United States, and they are each American heroes.
Yeah, now, I wanted to ask you, and I know you are an attorney. So how do you get involved with this case? Like, specifically, what brought you to it? Attorneys get to decide sometimes if you want to pick a case or not, even if you get the client. So what told you, what got to you to was like, I want to really take care of this case, and it matters to me?
Well, you're right. I'm an attorney, but more than being an attorney, I'm a courtroom trial lawyer, and with a good number of years under my belt. I'm not sure if you know or realize, but I'm a friend of Donald Trump's from the time I was 15 years old. He and I were classmates at New York Military Academy. And so I'm his age. I'm 4.5 months older than he is. So, but let's just say that gives me a lot of experience in being a trial lawyer. I've had cases around the country, been to in other countries. Well, one other country, Canada. I've been to the Supreme Court of Canada. I've been to the Supreme Court of California, Supreme Court of Florida, in the appellate courts of the federal courts, the trial courts, and of course the appellate courts in Florida and other states. And I've had, I don't even know how many trials I've had, but I'm let's just say I'm well respected, and I'm a little bit of a scrapper, what you might call, I fight the good fight. If that's, I think I'm known for that. And I mean, not with dirty play or anything like that. It's just that I fight hard. I fight to win, and they know me, the people that hired me, and they know of my reputation. So, so I was brought into the Tina Peters case. There were already 4 lawyers on the case, 4 great lawyers. There's Patrick McSweeney, who actually was a lawyer for Richard Nixon. He goes back just a little longer than I do. We've got John Case, great lawyer in Colorado. I mean, these are bright minds. I've got Robert Sinclair from Virginia, partners with Patrick McSweeney, and Stephanie Lampert, who is also on the case. So, I came into this with 4 really good lawyers. I didn't know them well. I knew Stephanie Lampert because our paths had crossed a few times, and I knew she was a real fighter for her clients. But I didn't know the others. But I still, when I came in, they were just. It was all wonderful. I was asked to come in as the lead, and I did. And I was smart enough to not get rid of anybody. And then I found out how valuable each one of those lawyers are. In Stephanie Lambert's case, it's a little bit different. There, I'm really the only lawyer on the team. I do have a local counsel, Dan Hartman, who's also known to be a pretty exceptional lawyer. But his role there is going to be more just as local counsel and advisors, local counsel in her criminal case.
And now she was sentenced, or at least for what I've seen, what I was able to research, 9 years. This was in 2021. So I'm assuming she has been serving that time. Now, once it's found, not guilty, and this case is completely removed, would there be possibilities for Tina and yourselves as a team to sue the state for wrongful imprisonment, but also for wrongfully accusing her of election fraud?
There may be actions that could be brought against, especially some of the people that were involved. The Secretary of State, for one, who, just think about it for a second. What do you have? You got somebody who was attempting to preserve evidence and who did preserve evidence, which when you preserve evidence, what you're doing is you're protecting the truth. And she is serving 9 years in prison for what she did. And the people who want to obfuscate and to basically get rid of the truth and live in their big lie, they're the ones that put her there, and they're free. So we're looking forward to the day that things get put in their right place, where the ones who are guilty of the insurrection are behind bars, and those who are not are free. Think of it this way. I know your audience is mixed. I know your audience is part Democrat and part Republican, and that's great. And the Democrats are already thinking in their heads when I'm talking, this guy's so full of it. He doesn't, he's perpetuating the big lie. And all I ask is this, because now we have evidence. Now I can show that it's not a lie at all, that the election was stolen. But forget that, because you're not seeing the evidence. All you're doing is hearing me, in my opinion. But I only ask you this. What if the election really was stolen? What if it was fixed? Well, we know Joe Biden didn't fix the election because he couldn't fix a flat tire. Nothing really. I'm sorry if I'm insulting the man. He's an elderly man. Maybe I should show my respect. But the fact of the matter is, he's not the one that did it. Who did it? Perhaps the people that brought that virus upon us. Perhaps people in the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization. Maybe some of these people are part of a cabal. that basically has paid for it. I mean, who is this guy Soros? Why is he sending money in? Why is he getting people elected that shouldn't be elected? Who could it be? And if it did happen, and it was foreign actors that were involved, what that really means is that our nation was taken over by foreign powers for 4 years. And if you don't think so, I mean, unless you're just hard to the right, let me ask you this. When did it become a good idea to open up our southern border? When did it become all right to weaponize over the last 4 years to the degree the weaponization was done? And if you don't believe me about weaponization, look at the charges against Donald Trump. Look at the kinds of charges there are against Stephanie Lambert. Look what they did to Tina Peters. But they did it to far more. They did it to police officers. They did it to doctors who prescribed ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine or were against the jab. They did it to people that were involved in cyber currency. These people were targeted. They did it to people on the upper middle class that were MAGA people that liked Donald Trump, targeted with offenses that, where they either didn't do it or some minor little thing like what would be the equivalent of not coming to a full stop at a stop sign, where you come to a rolling stop. All of a sudden they're enforcing things that never needed to be enforced before. And the people are basically innocent and getting thrown into jail and having their small fortunes. I'm talking about upper middle class people with millions of dollars, where the millions of dollars are taken away, so they don't even have the money to hire a lawyer. This is done all around the United States under the Biden administration. So who are these people that took over? And should you pay a little bit more attention in a more fair way instead of getting lost in the fact that Donald Trump, that you don't like him? Rather than hating Donald Trump, look at it objectively, because you know what? If I'm right and the 2020 election was stolen and we end up losing out in the future back to this cabal, don't think that you're going to do well. We're all going to go down. China will have won the war without having to fire a shot. So, please give that consideration. And for those, and I'd say that one more thing, for those that get discontented, like Donald Trump, but you get discontent with him because of something you don't like, just understand, if you turn your back on him, you're turning your front to China. You don't have an option.
And I wanted to ask, with that part, do you think this is a elaborate attack on Republicans, like right-wing activists or right-wing elected officials that is happening, that we have seen a little bit of it going on and now more since the last election? Do you think this specific, the case of Tina, was a case to where they were attacking her more because of her political beliefs and less of what actually was happening?
It's all, yes, I think you're spot on. I think that this is all political. I think all of these attacks against the people on the left, but it's no longer Democrats versus Republicans. That's gone. Now it's MAGA. Now it's Donald Trump. Now it's what we call common sense versus extreme left. And the numbers are with us. Okay. I mean, you look at a lot of the polls and they come out like almost 50-50, the nation is evenly divided. It's not so. The silent majority is far bigger than the loud minority. Okay. The loud minority, and look at the polls after the State of the Union address, which was about 6 weeks after Donald Trump took office. CNN said that 69% of the population approved of his speech. Well, let me tell you something. If you don't like Donald Trump, you don't approve of his speech. If you got Trump derangement syndrome or far less of a dislike, you're still not going to like his speech. 69%, according to CNN, up to 76% on the other polls, like the people approved of his speech. That gives you a hint as to the numbers that are really there in this country. So you're right. You're right. It's very political, and the things coming down on people are political. But look at where it's happening. In states like Colorado and states like Michigan, they've been taken over by the left, and they're not worried about losing an election because they know they have it. I mean, this all started, in about 2008. It started in Venezuela in terms of stealing the elections and getting the equipment and the machinery involved to be able to do it. And ultimately, this was all brought home to the United States. And that's why we're using these machines that are able to be accessed remotely, just like your cell phone can, without having to be plugged into the internet. This is what happened. Now we have Donald Trump. It's been coming out lately as to the fact that that certain machines that were in Serbia, which would have gotten all these other votes during the last election, 2024, it was compromised. Those machines were compromised. They were made so they couldn't work. And when that happened, that's why Donald Trump was able to win the election. Otherwise, Kamala Harris would have gotten the 81 million like Biden did to be able to beat Donald Trump. It would have been fixed. But somebody stepped in, an American hero stepped in and made sure that the election wasn't stolen in 2024. But that'll never happen again. These people that had those machines are not going to make them accessible or vulnerable again, and there'll be plenty of redundancies and so on to make sure they're safe. That's the last time that they'll ever let that happen.
Absolutely. And do you think do you think that in the next year or two, this case could be finalized and Tina could be freed from being in jail and stuff like that? Or do you think they will take a little longer for the system to actually see what's going on?
Oh, no. I think the Court of Appeal works at its own pace in Colorado. It's been taking a long time to get there, but that's not because of wrongdoing. At least I have no evidence in any way that that's because of wrongdoing. It's normal scheduling. And that's all coming to a head in January when we do our oral argument in the court. And then after that, we're going to get a decision within probably relatively quickly, certainly within 2 or 3 months. Right now, we have a wonderful judge. He's paid attention. I'm expecting him to do the right thing. In Colorado, there's a lot of pressure on the judges to do the wrong thing because because the state is gone. All the power in the state is to the left. It was all stolen and it remains stolen, but it's going to get reversed. We go forward in 2026 with paper ballots. You're going to see half the Democrats in the House of Representatives are going to be gone. That's going to show you how crooked the system is right now and how corrupted it really is. You're going to see the same thing happen in the Senate. I'm telling you, most of the people in this country are against the idea of bringing millions and millions of the world's worst people into our country. When we do it through legal immigration, we get the best people. But when it's the scofflaws that don't care about the laws in terms of coming in, we get all kinds. We've got gang members. We've got all kinds of the worst. Maybe there's some very decent people that came into, maybe a good percentage of them are very decent people. But for sure, some of the worst have come in. So these things just don't make any sense. They need to go. We need to get our election systems back. We need to be able to have our own country again. And that's what we're losing. Believe me, this is because of foreign influences. This isn't because of just certain traitors that are in the United States. When this all gets figured out, you're going to see trials. You're going to see who actually committed an insurrection. And believe me, it was not like the January 6ers, etc. I could tell you about January 6th as well, if you want. But that's a whole other.
Let me, if you don't mind, if I ask you real quick, how does the process for that actually goes? Requesting a pardon and going through that process for not only the January 6ers, but also for Tina herself.
Okay, well, the January 6ers, I think I was one of a whole chorus. I don't think I was the only one calling for the January 6ers to be pardoned. I mean, what January 6th, first of all, since we're talking about that, I want to just mention it was planned in advance by the left, by people in the deep state and Homeland Security. I've got access to videotapes of the Zoom conferences that were taking place back then, where they were planning on breaking windows and entering the Capitol on January 6th, going back all the way back to September, before the election actually took place in November. So, January 6th is all part of the stealing of the election, because look at how people reacted to January 6th, and they wouldn't even discuss anything after that, because they were told lies. They were told 5 officers were killed, and so never happened. That's all a lie. So looking at January 6th, that's a different deal, because that needed a massive pardon on Donald Trump's first day in office in order to end the nightmare that was going on for these people. Who were these people? They're people that own businesses. They're people that are employed. They're good American people that you would like, people that you would not mind having at your Thanksgiving dinner table with you. These are good people. They're not Antifa, and they're not communists, and they're not Nazis. They're just good Americans. And they're standing there and they're singing "God Bless America" and they're praying, and then they get, all of a sudden, in come the fireworks, of tear gas and percussion bombs onto them, getting them riled up, getting them moving. What went on there was, then they had this list. There's 1,600 people, 1,600. They brought them in to interviewed them. Thank you very much for telling us where you were and what you did. And then 2 months later, they smash in the doors in their houses. They pull the people, the parents, and the whoever's accused, and his wife or her husband and their children out. The people are afraid to move because they're standing out in the cold in their underwear. And what are they looking at? They're looking at their children with red dots all over their children's chests from the laser sights that were on the guns and rifles of the 60 and more police that were coming to do this bust of these decent people. So, when you look at who they were, they needed to be pardoned. But for most people that need pardons, they need to put in an application for pardon. And it's better, they stand a better chance if they have a lawyer or somebody that knows what they're doing to help them through the process.
So, and this is like this pardon application. Does it take months? Does it take like weeks? Can it take years to be pardoned?
Great question, because it depends on everything. Every president is different, and every president that did 2 terms is different in their first term than they were in the second term. In the first term, they don't want to get people upset because they're pardoning too many people. So that usually they're more conservative in their first term, and they're more generous in their second. What's going on now is that now with this weaponization that occurred, and by weaponization, I don't mean going after somebody that's a political opponent because that person violated a law and they shouldn't get away with their crimes. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when you do what Stalin said, show me the man and I'll show you the crime. Okay, that's what he said. Because basically you're going after a person. You're not trying to solve a crime. Okay, that's the big difference. So if you look at Adam Schiff and the fact that there was criminality involved in the way he finances his properties, that's one thing where he's committed a crime. And where a private citizen unearthed it, and then the police pursue it. That's different than when you go after Adam Schiff and say, let's see what we can find. Let's see what we can charge him with. And by going through everything and subpoenaing everything or doing it, then you unearth the crime and you say, now we got him. That's weaponization. That's lawfare. And that's what's been going on in the last administration throughout the country. It was so pervasive. People don't know this, but I do pardon work, so I see it. I hear. I get people calling. A guy called me one time. He had $115 million in his bank accounts. They seized it. They then brought him in, and threatened him with all kinds of other offenses. They're going to put him away for 20 years, and they're also going to get his wife. So he ends up pleading guilty to something, put him in jail for 3-4 years. He had no money for a lawyer, even though he was a multi-millionaire. This is what was going on all over the country.
So this was just, as we mentioned, like with the January 6ers, like a lot of those people were also middle class and they didn't have the money, to pay for like an expensive lawyer. They didn't have the money to pay $1,000 per lawyer or something. So that's why a lot of them had to wait for this pardon, I'm assuming.
Well, they all got pardoned. The January 6ers all got pardoned, but some of them weren't released because there were secondary charges. So let's just say you're in a state where marijuana is not legal, okay? And so the police all go into the house, and after they take everybody outside, they go through everything in the house. They tear it apart. They weren't exactly kind and respectful to people's property. And so you have let's just say they found a stash of somebody's marijuana. So then they charge them for the marijuana as well, or for having a firearm, or for whatever. And so they didn't get pardoned right away for those things, although the pardon attorney did basically make it clear, and I think that the attorney general did as well, that those particular crimes were included in the pardons. So that worked well for most of them. I did have a fellow who got a pardon a couple of weeks ago that I had applied for, where it was exactly that situation where he had firearms in the house, and was convicted for those as well. So he was still serving a lengthy sentence that never would have come about had it not been for the fact that he was a J6er.
So it goes back to that part that I mentioned earlier, the attack on right-wing activism, right-wing elected officials. It goes back to that part, right? And now let me ask you, do you think this attacks will be eventually going away, or do you think these attacks will stay there against like people that believe in Trump and people that believe in the right-wing ways of living? Or do you think these attacks, do you see them leaving in the next year or so politically?
Your question is really one that's so fundamental that I think we need to just look at the two possible futures that we face. One future would have no rights for anybody. The only people that would be having any rights are those that are high up in the party. If we were taken over, if we ended up being a communist state, what would have happened? I am certain from what I have seen so far that the very next phase of weaponization would have been where they would be picking us up by the truckload. And I do believe that would be the world that we would be seeing if we right now had a President Harris, okay, because that's where it was going. The loss of individual rights. As long as you were getting along, you had to get along, go along in order to get along. And so you needed to be of the same mindset, saying the same things as everybody around you in that communist type of state where they wanted to do what we've now heard about New York, government grocery stores, et cetera, where, that's what happened in Russia when they were communists. And even after the war, after World War II, nobody had anything. People would go to the store. They couldn't get shoes. They couldn't get enough food. They couldn't get bread. And people were starving. But that's what happens when nobody's creating business. The entrepreneurs are all put aside and done away with, so that everybody can be equal and everybody could have a wonderful time. You know, you think of John Lennon's song "Imagine." I loved that song when I was young. You know, imagine, you know, all the people living life in peace. But there are other words in that are very frightening. Nothing to live for, nothing to die for. Who wants to live a life where there's no values that matter, where there's nothing to live for and nothing to die for? So, you know, to most of the people that I know and appreciate, that would be, that's a nightmare. And it's not a nightmare just for the people that are involved. It's a nightmare for everyone that's in existence in that system. Everyone suffers. The masses suffer greatly. Imagine if there's nobody being, nobody being incentivized to manufacture shoes, for instance. You really think you're going to have shoes? The world that they're talking about, as idealistic as it is, pretends that we're going to still have everything that we have. And it just is not the way it works, not in real life. The other possibility is that we have our government back again, and they're responsible, and they're doing things to make sure that we're protected, and we're protected in sensible ways. Not just that everybody's required to wear, if we have an epidemic of some sort, everybody's required to wear a mask, everybody's required to stay 6 feet away, nobody goes to work, nobody goes to school, stop everything. If that doesn't make any sense, then hopefully we'll have people that are in our government that are going to be making sense the way it used to be before we have all this craziness from the left, all this woke stuff. Where we have parents that, another group that were weaponized against, parents that went to Board of Education meetings and protested the fact that the school boards were allowing the children to be counseled into changing their sex. Imagine, Pete, as a parent, I'd be outraged if the teachers in the school would be encouraging my children to put tattoos on their skin. At least changing their sex. But that's what craziness is all about. Whoever thought that these things were a good idea, nobody in this country. It all comes from our enemies. And we do have enemies, I promise you that.
Yeah. So, and I wanted to, to close this episode, I wanted to ask you, where do you see this case yourself, but also the attacks that are happening on people like Tina going in the future? Do you think there's something that like Tina's case can solve and show the world that this was a political attack and it needs to stop? Or do you think there'll be more coming?
There are more coming on the state level because they're still in control of those states. But we really have not really done what needs to be done in the Department of Justice yet. We still have so many people that are in place that are from the Biden era, people who have, are going after people still. The weaponization by Biden didn't end yet because we have assistant U.S. attorneys that are in place that are not on our side. But I do think it's going to come to an end. I'll tell you this. I know Donald Trump. I've known him since I'm 15 years old. In my whole senior year, he was a captain. I was his platoon sergeant. He made me a platoon sergeant under him. And in a whole year of being 17, when we've got hormones going as well, other captains who would easily slap or knee a cadet while a cadet's standing at attention, even, believe it or not, other captains would do this. They got away with it. Nobody, wouldn't have been a problem. Donald Trump never, ever, ever did anything like that. In that year I lived with him, and when he was a captain, he was a good guy then, and he's still a good person now. I mean, look, let me put it to you this way. We had, remember Strzok and Page, the lovebirds? Remember their text? They talk about an insurance policy. Well, that insurance policy was that they were going to have a special prosecutor appointed who they know, because of the way they think, that everyone who's got money did something crooked. So here you had guys like Weissman, people that hate Donald Trump, intelligent people that are highly motivated, and with $30 million they spent on that investigation. And believe me, they weren't looking for Russian collusion, because they knew from the beginning that that was a myth. They were looking for any other crime that they could find. They were looking for him spitting in the subways. They couldn't, I don't know how many men of means could have possibly passed that test. But you've got to admit that this man is an honest, decent man when you look at the fact that they couldn't find a darn thing that he'd done illegal. Spending $30 million searching for it with endless energy. So if you're looking at a man like that, that is getting us set back straight, so our laws are in place, he's going to be out of office in another 3 years. But in the meantime, he's got a lot to do to fix. He's got to fix the election system. He's fixing the military. He's fixing our place in the world. Because let me tell you, we get along with a lot of other countries. We don't get along with every country, but we tend to get along. But we're alone. The United States is its own separate entity. And there are a lot of people trying to pull us down. And he's not going to let them do that. So I think going forward, we're going to see some of these things in response to your question, such as more attacks on people like Tina Peters, but it's getting to be less. And I can tell you this, he's not going to be coming after the upper middle class of the left. He's not going to weaponize. He's going to turn you around, because sooner or later you're going to realize that he's here to make your life better. And so I do believe in the future, now that Donald Trump won the 2024 election and he's getting things worked out and better. It's getting better and better all the time.
Well, I appreciate you, Peter, for joining me. This has been an amazing conversation. You know, I knew a little bit about Tina's case, but I think after talking with you, I have a better understanding, and I think I can go more in depth and find more online too. I will also add links referring to the case for people listening at home on our show notes, which are on our website, www.politicopod.com. And you can also find Peter's social media and like website in case you want to learn more about Peter, also in that show notes too. And Peter, if people want to learn a little bit more about the case, or like even just like get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Okay, that's easy. It's my website is legalbrains.com.
I love that.
Okay, legal, I'm a lawyer. Brains, what's in our, we're 10 lawyers in the firm. So it's what's in our craniums. Okay, legalbrains.com. And by all means, go to our website. You can find me and our other attorneys there. Also, in terms of Tina Peters, there's a fund, tinapeters.us. So by all means, please go to tinapeters.us, tinapeters.us, and give her a hand.
Absolutely. And again, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate this conversation. I appreciate you taking the time to be here to do this.
It's my pleasure. Truly my pleasure.
Thanks so much for listening. If you are enjoying Político, make sure to listen and follow on all podcasting platforms. If you are interested in learning more about the topic that we spoke today, follow the show notes at www.politicopod.com. Político is an Inquisitor Media original production hosted by me, Juan Collado Díaz. If you want to learn more about the work we do on our advocacy work, make sure to follow or visit Político at www.politicalpod.com.